Hello, everyone. I'm here with Lucretia VanDyke today, and I am so excited to have some time to chat. Lucretia and I have had a few different interactions, and I've never gotten the time to sit down with her. So Lucretia has been in the industry of herbalism for over 20 years. She's a holistic educator, a speaker, an herbalist, a sacred sexologist, ceremonialist, spiritual light coach, intuitive and energetic Reiki practitioner, diviner, and a world traveler with over 3,000 hours of training. She's been a holistic esthetician and practitioner for over a decade, focusing on integrating indigenous healing practices and rituals, plant spirit medicine, and meditation into her modern day practices. So you can see it's like there's like a menu of awesomeness with Lucretia. So thank you so much for being here and chatting about you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited about any time to talk about the plants and my journey with them. I am and so excited to be here with you too and sitting down with tea.
Yay! I'm in Florida, so I have like iced tea at the moment, and you've got
Yeah,
your warm tea, so it's
yeah,
perfect. Um, so you wear a lot of hats. Like I just went through that big list.
yeah.
I'm curious, and I'm sure everyone is. So what is it like day to day? Like you wake up, and what do you do?
That's so funny. Everybody always asks, and I have to stop for a second. And I was like, okay, what hour is it? You shift so much. I just recently moved to New Orleans. So that's been really exciting to just weave in just being still into my day. So I typically start with like a prayer to my ancestors and that kind of, reverence thing. I have my coffee and my meditations. And then I just had to keep a lot of reminders of what I'm doing. So, and what I'm talking about, but it's such a living embodiment of my lifestyle that it becomes a little easier. But in one day I can hold space for the birth of a child and that kind of thing, with helping midwives, learn indigenous, ceremonial practices around that and herbal medicine. And in one day I can, hold space for death and grief and, working as a death doula, helping families understand that transition. And in between times, it's like you talk about sex and wellness and yonis. And at some point, it was just like I felt like I said yoni more than my own name. It was just like I did that so much for a while. So things seem to shift and evolve throughout the day. But I've always held space in so many different ways. So, it's just shifting and making sure I have the moments in between the spaces to have like a little bit of ceremony for myself to switch gears.
Mm, mm.
So it's a lot of plants in between. I have a huge tincture arsenal. And so I'm doing like herbal consults and community classes. So, I take it, one person at a time, 1 second at a time, lots of herbs, for focus and, nervous
Right.
system.
So what do you think attracts people to you? Like why you?
A lot of times I ask that as it's really interesting. My story, I was, a mixed child born into a Southern Baptist kind of racist family. So I was like this little brown child in a sea of red and heads and blonde hair people. And being in the South, you find a lot of people who would judge you for your external thing that you didn't have any choice in looking at. So I kind of use that as an example for myself to be who I am, where I am. I realized early that people are going to dislike you for things that you have no control over. So I've just learned to be the living embodiment of true authenticity. I feel like I can't teach something I don't live. And, my name Lucretia means light bringer. And I'm just such a giggle box, even though I've gone through so many painful things in my life. I just use my pain to transform into a purpose. And I'm like everybody's biggest cheerleader. I don't care what you're doing. I'm like, are we going to celebrate that? Are we going to do it? And I think it's the lifelong connection since I was a child to the plants. I feel like they've really taken me in their world, and to be able to share with that enthusiasm and that heart and that love which is at the base of everything I do. I'm like, I think that that's one of the biggest things that people tell me. They're like, I just love your vivacious spirit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that, I mean, how fantastic is that? Do you feel like this was like a gift since you were a child, or is this something that you cultivated in yourself, or a little bit of both? Or
Honestly, people ask me that, and I really have worked with plants since I was born to a family of farmers. So like you automatically have this living embodiment of a connection to the land, with my Scottish and Irish ancestors who really learned to work the land. And so, yeah, and like baby Lucretia would love to like, it's funny because now I realize like I would mix herbs and muds and clays together and then put them on my brother and then make him take medicine. He's like, you tried to poison me. You tried to feed me pokeberries. And I was like, I wasn't trying to poison you. I was trying to give you an exorcism, because he was kind of mean when he was little. And so baby Lucretia would always like mix things and talk to the plants and lay with the plants, and especially by the river, and dream of a life that she wanted past the farm. And I don't know, it's been a lifelong thing, and I just didn't realize you could do it for a living. And I was like, wow, people get paid for this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how awesome is that? You should add that you do exorcisms on your bio. Pediatric exorcisms.
I was like, it's only 2 pokeberries.
So when I hear you talk about your work, I hear the word ancestors a lot. And I was wondering if you tell us more about your ancestors, and that why is that important to you? That connection.
For me, as I just mentioned, like being born into, my mother having to be a single mother and being raised by my white side of my family, I did not know my father's side of my family ever. And the connection was so, even the connection to myself, like even when I found out that I was half Black, I got super sad about that and very depressed for a very long time, several years. And it took this Black woman, including me in a group when we were in theater class one day. And like, she was like, we have 3 Black women in this room. And at first I ducked my head in shame. And then something just lifted my head up and was like, no, we don't do that anymore. And I began to go like, I don't really know what that is, but I'm going to go on a journey to learn it. And because of racial issues in the South, that just led me to understand that I had to research the culture more, because I'm just, you're too white to be Black and too Black to be white. So you're in a neutral world, sometimes just alone as a separate group. So I just began to study, like I got Sister Soldier and like Sojourner Truth, and then Alice Walker, and then Toni Morrison. So I just built this family. And then when I actually did my deep healing work around my, traumas with my father, my biological father, I did 10 days of silence. I called a sweat lodge for myself, just like all the things, and then did an acupuncture reset treatment, all within 6 months, because it was 2 years after his death. I finally was able to mourn him, and the plants helped so much with that. And then after then, it's like the ancestors just kept coming in. So like my passion connection to ancestral things is, first of all, because I have no connection to my blood family and they don't know the stories. And so as I began to study with people like Subonpu Somé, who, we lost her in the physical in 2016, and she really helped me break open that bridge and understanding my people's connection to ancestors. Traveling throughout Southeast Asia was my first time of seeing ancestor reverence, was in Thailand, and they had these spirit houses, and they brought these bowls of fruit, and every morning was ancestors. So I started thinking, I don't have that thing. And then meeting, Subonpu, and then Yeye Louisa Tesh, also is another foremost expert in African spirituality. I started finding our roots in it. And I started finding my power in it. And, began to do the healing work of intergenerational trauma, as well as my trauma that was there. And so, and even learning the plants, I would kill fake plants. I really would. And then I was like, I come from farmers. This makes no sense. This is in my DNA. And so I remember one day I was frustrated over a dead plant. And I asked my ancestors to help me learn how to take care of the plants and use me as a vessel to move through me. And all of a sudden it just started happening. I could hear like, okay, you need to put Epsom salt, in the, soil when you plant the tomatoes. Like weird, not weird. It's not weird to me, but other people will be like, oh, maybe she needs to see a psychiatrist. But like to me, I know that, I hear my grandmother's voice when I cook. I created these ceremonies to keep them close. And so it's important to me to help other people because I find so much in society, people are like, oh, I want to study native tradition and you have no native blood, or, oh, I want to study this. But I'm like, we all have a rich, deep ancestral connection to our people. And when you tap into your people's medicine, power happens. I mean, you tap into the first one. Nobody would be here if our family did not have a connection to the plants. Nobody would. And it's so, to me, to inspire someone to look into their roots and help working on healing the intergenerational trauma, I love the emails I get.
One of the things I love about what you're saying is that I think a lot of people look at someone like you who's, really connected to their ancestry and think, gosh, she's lucky that she has that she kind of was given that or was raised that way or like knew all of her ancestry, and I think it's probably a little bit more of a surprise for people to find out that those connections were severed to some extent, or at least stretched very thin, and that you really had to nurture this, like it was your intention and and your time and your energy and probably other types of things that you invested deeply in reviving this, and now it sustains you, but I think that's really important to bring that.
Yeah, and people, it's not easy, especially when you're dealing with the ancestor work I have both sides of hate that I'm standing in the middle of. I will never see my entire family at the same dinner table. But on my ancestor altar, I have all the pictures together. So I'll make a plate for them and then we eat dinner. So in that way, in the spirit world, it becomes so much bigger. I have the best relationship with my father. When he was in the physical world, our story disconnected that and I couldn't do it. But in the spiritual world, and with the plants that I use for like the ancestors and, my way of spiritual bath and these ceremonies, it hasn't been easy. I've had to wake up, before sunrise and climb the mountain to see the shaman, to do the thing, like, and I'm like, I've done those things. And so I like to teach from experience. So hopefully you don't have to climb the shaman, do 10 days of silence, have a sweat lodge and all the other things.
So sticking with kind of the ancestry thing for a little bit, let's say more specifically your herbalist ancestors, since this is what we're, in the broad sense, but that's what we're focusing on a little bit today. Let's say they are hovering over you, watching you for a day or two. And I'm wondering, what do you think, they're probably like, what is that strange box she's talking to or something? But, what do you think they would recognize? What do they see that they're like, oh, look at her. She is definitely an herbalist, or, So what would they see that's familiar?
I think they would just be so proud because, I still make my grandmother's onion syrup recipe that she made me when I was I was a child, everybody else got like, cool, like chicken soup and stuff. No, I got boiled roots and some kind of like folk something. So it's always inertly been there. I think that they would probably giggle at the way that I kind of add a lot of Hogwarts things to my stuff. I'm like, and I make weird jelly combinations using flower essences and flavors that they wouldn't. And the vegan cooking thing, they would never understand. Like, never understand vegan cooking. Like, I at all. They're like, what is seitan? No, sis, no, baby. This doesn't work. So a lot of it they would, but it's also an expansion of studying the other herbs and how I formulate according to like all of my training from around the world. I just had this ancestor eye reading from like one of these readers, and she looked in my eyes and she said she would see like almost the ancestors in my eyes peeking out, like, what is she doing now?
So let's say you want to give back to these ancestors, and the way that's going to happen is by you teaching them about something you do or something about herbalism or spirituality that you think would be really of value to them. You want to share something. What would you share with them? What do you think you've kind of put together or discovered or created?
People always, kind of, giggle. And another thing, people love me. I live a delicious life. I allow myself to do that. I like creating magic moments for the women in my family who couldn't, and also for the men and women in my family who couldn't. And they worked really hard, both sides, to be able to sustain just a basic life. And so I really try to spend this life living deliciously and being the dream of my ancestors. So every time I'm like, I get flown somewhere to educate, or I go to Thailand and run with the elephants, or like all of those things, I take them with me. And every time I get to make a free decision to move in the world or move to New Orleans or whatever, I take all the women in my family who didn't get to do that and all the other people. So my sense of freedom is how I honor them and pay them back. And taking care of myself in such a delicious way is also my way. They love it when we laugh. They love it whenever we live and and celebrate and all of those things. They absolutely love it. So that's my way to pay them back, is living a delicious life in their honor.
Love that. I love that. So let's talk about herbs for a little bit, kind of in a playful way. So it's a little cliched, but I'll make it a little more interesting. So you're stuck on like a tropical island, beautiful tropical island. Everything's great. You have all the food you need, all the vegan food.
Yeah.
You have all of those things, but you can only pick 3 herbs and to have on there. And let's just say your health and medical needs are covered.
Okay.
Not what those things are. But what 3 herbs would you need otherwise, that you're like, I could not live without those 3 herbs?
I think this is like the herbalist hardest question ever to answer.
I know. It's so fun because my answers always change, but like.
Yeah, me too. But it's almost like you have to pick your favorite child.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's that personal. So all your medicinal, okra definitely is a big one for me, spiritually, and so many other ways, and also very sacred to my people. So that medicine for sure. Let's see, holy basil, I guess, because it's holy basil. I mean, like, what else? I love the smell. I love it in spiritual baths. I love it in teas. I love it all the time. It's a daily part of my practice. And then another one, it would either have to be, and these are just, life everlasting, of course, which is another connection to my people, but my night blooming tobacco is pretty much, I have a love affair. Like I'll carry it from, everywhere I am. My afternoons with her is such a ritual when she blooms that I cannot see myself not living with that plant.
It'd be a nice garden, the okra and the holy basil and the night blooming tobacco. And I think that would be, I could see
that was
tending
my
that garden.
I had an astral garden, like what I did in the evenings with moonflowers and mugwort and night blooming tobacco and then night blooming jasmine. I'm still searching for her. And so that would be me in a cup of tea at sunset. And I'm like, don't talk to me. Don't call me. Don't nothing. I'm like sitting here like with bated breath, waiting for all the blooms to open. And I'm going to squeal like a 3-year-old child. Like every day I'm going to squeal like a 3-year-old child.
Yeah. I love that. I know. I mean, those, something about evening flowers or such, transient flowers. And I went away one summer a couple years ago, and I came back, and And when I came back, there was datura like everywhere in my garden, and I had never had datura. I'd never grown datura, and it was literally, I mean, it was like a little intense because in the grasses around the garden and the lawn, I kind of feel like there's just datura and flower, and I remember just being so overwhelmed. I know there's a lot of symbolism there too, but it was like, wow,
Yeah.
where did you come from? So, but it's, you know, here to stay, a little more chill now, but um yeah, it is hard to choose those herbs, isn't it? Because we have our different. Now, what about like, you know, what about dietary herbs that you like? Like, are there any that, you know, you love the flavor of, this, you know, the sensory aspects
Yeah.
of cooking? What are you big fan of?
I'm pretty obsessed with nettles. I
Mhm,
keep dried nettles next to my stove and it goes in
mhm,
everything. So
mhm,
that is like my daily go-to. I feel like there's not enough ways you can get it into. I like spice blends with it.
mhm.
I love to cook with it. I mean, I added random things, my grits, you know, cornbread. Like, I'm like, where can I put nettles? I'm like, that's one of my biggest passions is how to find a way to put the plants into as much food as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
So that definitely is one of mine. Turmeric definitely is a big one of mine.
Mhm.
And then, you know, some of the, you know, spring lymphatics are like such a big one for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I love all the things that come out in spring. I get excited and I'm like, I'm out in the woods, like chewing on cleavers and, you know, making crowns out of them. And so I just get excited, dandelion greens and those kind of things, you
Mm,
know, because, you know, we've been through winter, even though
right.
I love roots. Root harvesting is one of my favorite things because it teaches us patience in our life
Mhm.
and know that there's things happening even when we don't feel like they are.
Mm,
But you know, all of the spring grains and things are like really big favorites of mine.
mm.
And I've just recently gotten into the Southern tradition of poke salad.
Mhm.
So you can't ever say poke in the South without the elders being like, poke salad? And I
Yeah.
was like, what? I was like, no, it's really just poke, but never mind. You cannot convince them that those two words go together and they don't separate.
Mm, mm. That's such an intense and very interesting plants.
It is
Yeah.
very so, and I got really afraid of using it because of, you know, herbal schools, but not really paying attention to our traditional folk, you know,
Mhm,
way that my people, it's a huge medicine of my
mhm.
people. And like even the first time I really started playing, you know, it's like baby steps. Like you don't just jump in there. Like, you know,
Right.
I'm not just gonna go out and just harvest. But I remember the trepidation and then the circle of sisters I called that were herbalist and like we had a conversation about it being our people's medicine and like having a reclaiming almost of using it in
Mhm.
certain ways, but don't think that I did not boil that thing like 5 times. It was like it was almost mush and it was funny and I was like, you know, but it was beautiful. I
Yeah.
did a plant meditation with it and could see a lot of you know, plant spirit meditation with it too. I was sitting in the middle of the woods with the plant and, you know, took a little bit of the tincture and just sat with it and asked it to tell me
Mm,
the story. And that was the story. I saw
mm,
the hands of
mhm,
the ancestors going so back with that one.
mm.
So yes, it is not for the faint of heart. It is not for the person who just wants to twirl through the woods. Make sure you understand what you're doing when playing with that plant.
Right, right, absolutely. I'd love to hear more about okra. You know, you mentioned
Yeah.
okra, and I've been fascinated with okra for a long time, especially because in my travels I've seen it pop up in different places in the world. So that's, you know, pretty exciting. So will you tell me about okra?
I love it for so much about your diet. I mean, to me, I was like, what about this plant that it was the one thing, you know, one of the plants that my people braided the seeds in their hair when they were captured and thrown on and being
Mhm.
enslaved. Like, what about this plant that they knew? So to me, other than, you know, so many of the medicinal, you know, properties of okra, I love the ritual of you know, having the seed and having it in my hand. It's one of the
Mm,
few plants I grow from seed because the
mhm,
ceremony is so important. Like the blessing of the earth and the seeds that go through that I thank the ancestors and the watering and the watching of the process. And it was so funny, it came to me about doing spiritual baths with it. just randomly as I was tending the plants and watching the flowers and the things like that. And so I was like, okay. And so it was the first flower essence I also made was okra flower essence. It was just like, it just kept coming to me. And then a couple months later, I met Louisa Tesh. She wrote the book Jambalaya. She's a huge elder, just amazing woman, ceremonial, all the things Louisa is. And I started telling her about it. And she says, who told you that? And in her book, Jambalaya, she talks about she who whispers. And she who whispers is like the voice that we have that comes in with the plants when we allow it, that almost tell us how to use it. And I was getting that okra really helped. And then I started researching more. And energetically, when we use it, it helps clear out the lower chakras of the body and helps move a lot of stuck, stagnant energy. And then as I, began to research even like boiling the pods and using the water in these spiritual bath, practices, how much movement I found in my stagnant energy from this one. And when I add the okra flower essence, like a few drops in some of my tinctures and formulas for people who are going through issues that deal with the lower chakras, and like in making that, I have found that it makes such a big difference in moving that, and also with people with, trying to connect to the ancestors, because it is such a deep plant. I mean, of course, I love it fried, honey. I just have to be like, let's get real. Like, fried okra is like a thing that I love and I've loved since birth. And I remember that being so excited even when that was on the menu for the night. So it has so many multiple meanings for me, both spiritually and medicinally.
I've always been fascinated by it. I mean, I every time I've grown it, which is not much because I'm from the Northeast where it doesn't really grow that well, but I never ever pick it and eat it because it's just so cool how it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and then it splits open, and I just don't want to pick it. Like it's so exciting. But when my kids were little, I've never really eaten a lot of okra. I mean, a little bit, like especially in the Indian tradition, those little like tiny okras. Those little thumb-sized ones. But I had such a strong sense to feed my babies okra, like when they were little babies, and so they still love it. But I mean, I would make them big plates of okra, and they would just gobble that stuff down. So I have to be honest that when I think okra, I think about years of okra diapers. It's just like, woo, but it's such a profound medicine, and those demulcent medicines are like they're the thing that there's no parallel to it, really. Like you can look at creating relationships between like herbs and drugs where they're like, well, this one does something a little bit similar to that, but like there is nothing like this that's all slimy and gooey, and it's awesome. It's so
It is. And like I think of like so many of the different ways that we can use it to add, even, I always go back to the energetic, because I feel like when it comes to plants, they are so much about the body, the mind, and the spirit to create this holistic environment that can facilitate wellness. And only until we honor all of those parts. And so I really get into, not only understanding how to hard formulate, but also how to formulate for that. And if we think about, that's adding juiciness to our life. And that's where, especially women who run so hard, giving so much, I think of like what foods, those demulcents are really something beautiful to add just juiciness into like your food. And, people will get really weird about the texture of okra. And I'm like, you can roast it. You can do so many different things with it. And combining it. I just had African okra stew the other night. We walked through the French Quarter and went to dinner at this restaurant. And I hadn't really had it in stew form in a long time. We would do succotash and things like that when I was little. And it wasn't my favorite because I was always waiting for the fried okra. But I really just have begun embracing it for that one factor, that juiciness. And like, I'm like, oh, it's adding all this beautiful lubrication into my body. And, especially on those coffee rich days that you need to drink sometimes to get through the, 15 hats that you wear in a day.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that. So what are you learning about right now? Especially something that's like making you reframe things you already thought you knew. Is there anything like that? you've learned about
You know,
recently?
I'm down here really getting into the belly of New Orleans culture, working really hard at, starting, I've been teaching a class about the legacy of women of color healers, especially in the South. So I'm down here doing research to, push it into becoming a book and like starting to do that. So for me, getting deeper into the belly of Southern culture and the connection to the plants in different areas. So like going out to the swamp and seeing what's growing in the swamp and how they use those plants there, and how so many pivotal people and my people, escaped and they existed in the swamp and on these certain plants and in this certain way that I can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, that thing is just really, I've been in North Carolina and we're so fortunate to have so many plants there. And like down here, it's a little different. So understanding a different level of cultural connection to the plants as far as ancestors, again, that is, what I'm in the belly of right now, and combining that with the history and how they've been used in ceremony. So I'm in the belly, and that how it focuses on New Orleans culture, which is so unique because it's like the jambalaya pot. It was one of the first ports that existed. And so you're bringing people from Haiti, different parts of Africa, and it's all nestled here in this town of resilience and love. Like so much love is here in New Orleans, more than I've really experienced in any other place in the South. I probably get told I love you like 5 or 6 times just from new friends. And like it's so heartfelt here. And that is like the ceremony and the connection to the plants in the oldest way possible. When my people, put foot on this ground, that's where my passion and my love is right now.
That's it's pretty awesome to explore. It's not just a new ecosystem you're visiting; it's like an ecosystem you're revisiting.
Yeah.
And are there any plants that you've met that you are really looking forward to getting to know better? Any ones that really
Oh,
stood out?
Spanish moss.
Spanish
Absolutely.
moss, uh-huh. Yeah.
Absolutely. Like that one is such a spiritual plant, and it's so interesting, like, studying again our culture to that, as like even as far as being an offering to certain orisha or our spectrum of gods and goddesses, and then being like, oh, it's medicinal too, like what? Like I'm like, not only can you make amazing things for your skin with it, not only can you use it spiritually for spiritual baths, but it's medicinal. So that one is definitely a big one for me to like really explore more, because I've always had a love for affair for it since I was a child, just seeing it blow in the trees. It's a magical, magical, magical plant.
That's amazing. You've mentioned you've called in a lot of names during this chat, where a lot of your teachers, a lot of people. I'm wondering, who's someone or a few someones out there right now who are really inspiring you that you think some of the listeners might want to look up and find out more about.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely my friend Michelle Lee, who wrote the book 400 Years Working the Root. She spent 26 years interviewing like elders she saw at gas stations and driving down dirt roads to like get stories of people and our people and their connection to the plants. She is definitely one of them. I love my girl Karen Rose in Brooklyn. She's like really lit the herbal world on fire. I love how she takes the stars and the planets and the herbs and the orisha, and she puts those all together and gives you this beautiful connection to the plants and rituals. I love root work herbals, like my girl Amanda David, like what she's doing as far as like, the people's medicine classes and like growing, getting farm plots for people to grow land. My girl, of course, Leah Penniman, who is teaching us, who wrote Farming While Black, who's like really talking about land ownership and understanding the large scale of how so much land has been taken from people of color, and watching her fight so much to like regain, to give us back farms, to have our own places to produce and have our own places to gather. Totally. Those are like my, my quick ones that are like my, all encompassing loved ones. I could keep going. I'm like Karen Culpepper. I was like, you know.
Yeah, well, it's a great list. And it's so incredible to be in a time where we can connect with folks from
Yeah.
all over the country like that in all these different ways. So that's great to call all those folks into the room. And um, so you know what's next? I mean, clearly the world needs what you're offering here. And I'm interested in what's next for you, but I'm also interested in like all the listeners that are here that are starting to wonder, like, maybe I have something to offer. Maybe I can connect with my ancestors and help others to connect with theirs ultimately. um yeah, what's next, and what should we all be thinking about as far as the future?
It's interesting to me, and I guess I was the same way in the beginning, that people make ancestral work like really like, oh, it's something I have to do, but it's really something you activate. They're in your DNA and your bone marrow. You cannot get any closer to your ancestors than really speaking their names around you. And I really, and understanding the ones for your highest and greatest good. You don't want your crazy drunk uncle trying to show up to give you advice at all, but and for me, I think it is getting the information. It's the book. It's even more future, having an indigenous and people of color herbal conference that stands equally to all the other big herbal conferences. Where we can have so much to highlight that. It's continuous community herbalism classes. It's raising the vibration of the plant world for me so much, and helping people understand that I don't feel like in so many ways that I feel like we're using the plants at half capacity and not really understanding the other half of that. So I'm hoping that, people will see and hear and be inspired about the magical way I look at them, and understand, that, you too can do those things. It's in you. It's just by connecting to the plant world and allowing yourself and getting out of your own way. There's different ways to study herbalism. So I hope that my platform helps expand in a different way for people to get more involved in helping communities heal using the plants in that way.
So how would somebody get to know a plant in that way? So, they can look it up in
Yeah.
their books, they can look it up online, they can like take it in their bodies.
Yeah.
Um, what else do they do?
I'm all about, when you first meet a plant, of course you can look it up in the book, but I think you should truly be introduced to the plant. If you can have it in the physical, sit with it, talk with it, have tea with it, take the plant while you're sitting with the plant. Plant spirit meditation, seriously, is my easiest way for me to access that information. So, it's like taking the plant and then being in sacred space for about 10 to 20 minutes, paying attention to the vibrations, the colors, the things. I used to get in my way so much about that. And then finally I was like, okay, just show me how I used you in a past life. That sounds, so crazy. And I remember, okay, like elderberry. I had one with elderberry, and like, we all know what elderberry does, like the big things of it, but I didn't really know how it worked in the body. So I took the plant meditation and the medicine, and I'm in my, in my fields. I'm like, just meditate. Cause sometimes, as zen as I seem, it's still hard to meditate. And then all of a sudden I saw like this double helix come up that was like, moving. And then this green thing kept coming at it, but then this purple entity wrapped around the double helix and blocked the green thing from coming in. So at the end of the plant meditation, you have to share, I was in my group during one of my internships I was doing. And I was like, I don't know. I just saw this and told them that. And everybody stopped and they're like, do you know how elderberry works? I was like, well, kind of, but not really. And they're like, you totally just explained it. So I'm like, that has been one of the most beautiful ways for me to connect. And I really highly encourage other people, pick an herb a week or a month. Some I've studied for 3 months of doing nothing but plant meditations with them and seeing what comes forward, but then pairing that with the book. And it's really interesting what's in your body when you get out of your way of understanding and let the plant tell you how they work.
Mm. So, would you say that, you know, do you need to have training in this? Do you need to take a class in this? Could people that are listening just, literally they've got some plants that they've always been interested in the
Yeah.
woods or field or park. Could they just go sit down with them one day and do some of what you're talking about? Is that the idea here?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that it is a beautiful way. I mean, I definitely, for your own self healing, but definitely make sure what you're getting and what you're tasting and,
Mhm.
understand those things. But it is absolutely for everybody, even people I feel like who don't want to be a practicing herbalist. It's really, we've come to awareness definitely in this past year of the need to bring back the old ways of just keeping your own house
Mm.
in this, ever way. So I absolutely believe that plant medicine, as it originally was intended for us all on this earth, is for
Mhm.
absolutely every person to have that connection. And right now, during this great pause that we call, COVID, we're all so alone. And I just recently have gone through a divorce during COVID. And
Mhm.
so the plants energy, and I know I'm like plants, 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 but I'm like, no, 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 no. Like the space that they've held for me through the
Mhm.
grief and through the transition and like, taking the wood Bethany for, moving forward and helping my solar plexus, move through fear and, taking the other ones like mimosa to help the grief move. And, I don't feel alone going into
Mhm.
my kitchen and making a tea blend and like going, hey girl, hey, hey holy basil, hey roses, what's up? Like they
Mhm.
become a continuous part of you. And I feel like even walking outside, you're never alone with the
Mhm.
plants. And that's one thing I find so much. I have another talk tonight just about that, just about loneliness and what people are going through. So allowing yourself these adventures with the plants. I mean, some of my best times have happened at sunrise with the plants by myself.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, they're great company. Yeah,
Yes. I like
they
them so
really
much
are.
more than people sometimes.
I know. I say things like that a lot. I'm just like, yeah, plants have really figured it out. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like when they
People,
and when they accept you into your world, you feel like you're in the cool kids club. Like not that high cool kids club. Like I'm in the for real cool. I'm in the Mother Earth cool kids
Right.
club that not everybody will even allow themselves to be. So I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just like I'm a plant
Yeah.
loving nerd, but I'm in the coolest kids club ever.
Yeah, it is like always having friends everywhere too, which I think, being an herbalist and being connected to plants, and even if they're not like medicinal plants or plants that there's
Yeah.
even any, specific information out there, if you're connected to them, then, you've got your companions. And so
Yeah.
it's a pretty neat walk of life, I think. And I think it's
Yeah.
possible for absolutely anybody. Because there's so
Absolutely.
many outside of weedy lots and in back of mini malls and in disturbed
Yeah.
areas. Like you don't have to live in the mountains of North Carolina or something like
No.
that to have plants all around you that are medicinal. So it's
And I also
yeah.
think it's fascinating on your own personal journey to see what plants are in your backyard.
Hmm.
Like, not last year, but the year before, I had a random mullein just show up in a pot on
Hmm.
my porch, have no idea where this came from. There's no mullein around me. And I was like, what's about to happen? That mullein needs to be grown. And
Hmm.
so, and then all of a sudden, we get into
Right.
last year and I was like, oh, that's what you were saying. And then like in 2016, it was really crazy. Passion flower was everywhere. You could not harvest it. You were just like, I'm gonna have to just throw this away. And you're like, but we needed that energy. So it's so
Right.
interesting. I see that with myself, like just
Hmm.
walking outside
Hmm.
and picking these, flowers and plants. Mother Earth looks out for you,
Hmm.
and the plants do. And so it's fascinating that things that grow that you need will grow right around you. And
Right.
I
Right.
love I love that about the plant world.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that about the plant world too. I love that. Ugh. So I have one last question for you, and that is, let's say that you are able to send a message whisper it into the ear of a lot of budding young herbalists, or you could make it broader, people that are on a path that you could help inform their path, or encourage them? What would you whisper into all these ears?
Oh, I feel like, what would I whisper? Um, I might just do it, I think. People are so, I've even ran into people who've taken herbal training and don't formulate because they're just scared
Mm,
and they don't know.
mhm,
I mean, so many of my teachers were like, your herbal arsenal can be 5 plants that you know well.
mhm,
Just 5 plants that you really have taken the time to understand and learn. And just do it. Just
mhm.
go in there and pick the simple ones, and know that it's inside of you, that your ancestors knew it, and that through the activation and working the root and working the plants, you too can be, if you too can be one of us cool plant club people.
Oh, it's a great reminder. It really is. And I often think, because you don't have to pretend to be something you're not. You just have to be and do it. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, then you'll get there. And to just take those steps. That's awesome. Love that. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for being here. If people want to learn more about your work or find out more about what you're up to, do you have like a website or social media, or how do people find you?
I do. You can find me on Instagram. It's Lucretia Zen, LucretiaZen.
Mhm.
And then also on Facebook, it's Lucretia VanDyke. And then my website, I'm getting ready to do a complete rebranding because I feel like I've grown so much, but you can look me up at Sesen Group, SESENGROUP.com. Or you can just Google Lucretia VanDyke because I am in all kinds of places.
I love that. Exactly. That's
Yeah,
that's perfect, with your ancestors tagging along, watching you go.
the greatest time. I'm like, they just giggle at me. I think it's funny you ask that. Sometimes I'm like, oh wow, like the Southern Baptists might be a little weird about the conjure woman part of myself, but like it's hilarious.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm looking at you with this, ancestor-ish potentially person looking over you at this very moment in
That's
your
Emma
image.
Dupree. That's my North Carolina girl, one of the most famous herbalists from North Carolina. I teach about her a lot. Emma Dupree was just the most amazing person, and I
Mm,
really love to share her story because I don't think that those herbalists and granny midwives who carried community health and healing don't get seen and don't get heard, and their
mm,
stories don't get heard as much as some of the more famous herbalists. And
mhm,
these were the people who held together communities even in times where it was illegal to practice the medicine. So that's
mm,
Emma Dupree. She's a chosen auntie. That's what I say. She's
mm.
not blood, but she definitely is a chosen auntie and a chosen ancestor for me.
Is she
North
physically
Carolina
on this
herb.
earth still?
No, we
Oh, okay.
lost Emma. She passed away in the early 90s.
Okay.
And she started working. They called her Little Medicine Thing.
Mhm.
Ever since, and that's why I love her so much, because I was like that. I would stick roots, and I still do. I can come home at night and things will fall all out of places because I'm stuck roots and flower petals and whatever. And so Emma started. She says God taught her how to use medicine. She would spend, every kid would be playing. Emma would be collecting plants.
Mm,
And so everybody's like, what's Little Medicine Thing doing over there? And so she just crafted her whole entire life
mm,
around ever since. And that's one of the stories I love to share to help new herbalists understand
yeah.
another connection to how to learn the plants. And clinical herbalists or people who've had different training sometimes are like, oh, I don't know. But like folk medicine is real, and it comes from
Yeah.
long legacies of people, and those
Yeah.
stories and those ways of practicing deserve to be of the equal parts, because these are the
Mm,
people who wrote the beginning of the book
mm,
here.
mm. What a perfect note. We've got your ancestors, Emma Dupree, and their ancestors, and cup of tea. So thank you so much for all of this. And it was such a pleasure. And best of luck with your new life in New Orleans and making your
Thank
way.
you. Thank you so much. It was so great to chat with you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.